Hey gang, what is going on? Welcome back to another edition of the Square Roundtable, the show where we break down one specific topic about the world of professional wrestling. With you is Keith, Ryan, and myself. My name is Juan, and we are here to talk about movies about wrestling, particularly 5 movies that in some form people talk about, and we're just going to have this little conversation about which ones we like, which ones we don't, and at the end, we'll make sure to give you a recommendation about which of these movies should you check out and which you should avoid like the plague. So you guys, you ready for this?
Let's do it.
So let's start it off with one of the oldest and most recognized movies about wrestling, No Holds Barred. This was released, yes, like that. We're gonna get to that. This was released in 1989. Now, personally, I had not seen this until the Blu-ray came out because everybody hyped it up as this over-the-top, cheesy, released in 1989, so released when I was born kind of movie. When did you guys first see, or at least a trailer or the movie itself?
Years and years ago I saw it, and that was the last time I saw it, so I'm admittedly a little rusty on the movie. I saw it on like TNN or something like that. They were playing it on a Sunday. Yeah.
I've never seen this movie, so you guys are going to have to tell me more about it. Vaguely remember hearing things about it, and then of course I was reminded of it when they recently did that Blu-ray release a couple years ago. But yeah, I pretty much know nothing about it other than it's got Hogan and this guy Zeus in it, who ended up in a Batman movie later.
I'll be honest.
And really, that's all you need to know. It's if memory serves me, it's not a very good movie, like at all. Even from the point of just trying to put Hulk Hogan over, it's just not good.
Yeah, this movie only got an 11% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and it is produced by Hogan and WWE, so in many ways, it's just wrestling with a little bit more photographic.
So
it's
Hulk
like
Hogan couldn't even get himself over in this movie.
No, man, it was rough. I watched this about a year and a half ago, maybe like a year ago. I had the Blu-ray for the longest time since it came out, but I was afraid to watch it. I couldn't watch all of it. I actually got upset because everything is just, it's like, I've seen a lot of movies from the 80s and even 70s that I love, but everything about this was just so, hey, guess what? WWE produces, so guess what? We're just going to shove all this down so that after this, you just watch the product. And for me, I just don't get the appeal. I think it's maybe a think about its time. Like when it came out, I looked up online and the reviews were still negative. So it's not like, hey, 2016, compared to the past. It's just a rough movie. They actually got Zeus involved in the WWF at the time to sort of promote the movie. So this was the
very
precursor.
memorable run.
Oh, absolutely. But
run.
Ryan, all I can say about this is don't watch it. And if you watch it, make sure you're not just sane. Like have some friends over, then maybe you can cry, when on somebody else's shoulder. So does that sound good?
Together.
I think I'm probably not going to watch it. I'm going to heed your advice.
Good call. So now let's move on to movie number 2. Now, Beyond the Mat is more of a documentary rather than a feature film, although this did come out in theaters. And it was the topic of discussion because this was around the time where people sort of broke the fourth wall. They knew about kayfabe. They knew that wrestling was choreographed. It was staged. But here it is. You go behind the scenes. Vince McMahon was apparently told that this was going to be a small independent film, so they were able to capture a lot of these things where the microphone goes underneath the ring. This is something that I really never got a chance to watching in full, just because I don't know, based on everything I heard, I'm like, I'm good. Plus like Jake the Snake, it was a dark and gritty movie from everything that I've seen in clips. What about you guys in regards to the film?
This is another one that it's been years since I've been able to see, but yeah, like you said, it's very dark, very gritty. It's about as real of a look into the negative part of pro wrestling as it gets, and that would be my one critique of the movie itself, is they focus a lot on the negative. Like you mentioned, the Jake the Snake part and his tragic story, his tragic upbringing. That was at a point where Jake the Snake was at a very low point in his life. The whole part about Mick Foley and how they just would cut. It was the match with The Rock, the I Quit match at the
man, that
Royal
match.
Rumble, where they would show like Mick Foley getting hit over and over again with a chair. You know, that famous scene, and then his family was in the audience, and they would just cut to his wife and kids just bawling because their dad/husband is getting the crap beaten out of him. And I even Mick Foley said that he wasn't a fan of how detailed they got at that, or even the story about Draws. That's where that whole "he's gonna puke" came from, and that Draws' story did not end very well. So it was a very dark look into wrestling, and that's what a lot of people focused on for a very long time. It really put wrestling in a negative light.
Yeah, with Beyond the Mat, I believe I watched this not too far into me starting to watch wrestling around 2000. So this probably had to be my first real look at what's going on behind the scenes in wrestling.
I'd never
seen anything like that before. And you know what? It was I wasn't as into it then. I have rewatched it since. I don't remember if I watched the full thing, but I did watch a lot of parts a couple years ago. But back then, it's like that was my first introduction to ECW when they showed Paul Heyman just kind of, giving his rah-rah speech and everything. And then Jake the Snake, a lot of these guys at the time, I was so new to wrestling, I wasn't familiar with a lot of it. I was most interested in seeing the Mick Foley parts because that's who I had known and liked at the time. And it was crazy. And I mean, just to see Vince backstage and seeing, The Rock talk to Mick Foley's family before, just those little things was like really, really interesting at the time. And then, of course, I mean, it does get very dark at times. I mean, it was one of the first mainstream looks at behind the scenes in wrestling. And I think that's why it is so significant.
Yeah,
and I really think it still holds up today because there's never really been that in-depth of a look into wrestling ever again. Maybe that's because of what Beyond the Mat did, but it's a really good watch.
Yeah, I mean, Vince went out of his way to not promote it. He did not allow commercial breaks to air during Raw in regards to trailers or promotion for the film. So he tried his best to just black it out, have it be nowhere there. It was rated R for adults. And like it got an 82% score on Rotten Tomatoes as opposed to No Holds Barred. That film got crapped on. So at this, there's two sides of it, right? Like, yes, wrestling is this sad thing where some people fall into the hands of addiction, all these terrible things, but you also gain some sort of respect within all the negativity as to it's real. The bumps are real. The guy that can make it, but that they were trying to prepare him for the WWF, but he can pass some tests, that type of stuff. I mean, even years down the line, there were lawsuits related to some things that happened around this time that were addressed and Beyond the Mat was talked about. So more so than the film itself or the documentary, it's a historical moment for wrestling considering it came out in 1999. Now we're going to switch things up to one of my favorite movies of all time, Ready to Rumble. Here's the thing.
So before we start,
yes,
I have a confession to make. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I've never seen this movie. And this apparently blew your mind.
Yeah,
I have never seen this movie.
So disappointing.
Well, talking about the schedule here, I'm thinking, of course we all saw it, right? Keith says no, and I freak out. Why didn't you see it? Any reason?
I don't know. It's just, I've heard so much about it. I know of the key scenes and stuff just through osmosis, and I've never actually taken the time to sit down and watch the whole thing from start to finish.
We're changing that very soon. But
okay.
To get into a little bit more information about it, this was a tough time for WCW. The film came out in 2000. Now, 2000, 2001, not the best years for WCW, but the film starred a bunch of guys. I mean, if we get to the whole roster from DDP to Sting to Goldberg, basically, if you're in WCW, if you're somebody training in wrestling, John Cena was an extra for this movie. For context of just how many people were involved, the storyline revolved around two great hardcore WCW fans that wanted to go into their first event. Now, Jimmy King was the top of the food chain in the company. He was betrayed by the man that was originally going to be Eric Bischoff before he got fired by WCW. So that's why a couple of things changed just before they started recording. And it's this revenge story of the fans trying to motivate Jimmy King to get back into the company, to become champion once again. And in that, they learn a little bit about the experience. Ryan, you've seen it, correct? Please say yes.
Have.
Thank you.
Yes, I have. Of
Thank
course
you.
I have. I mean, I saw this back when it probably first came out on video, and I was a huge WWE fan. I had not watched much WCW, but I still love this movie. And of course, I had heard of guys like Goldberg and Sting. And yeah, no, I love this movie. And for a long time, as far as like movies that have to do with wrestling, this was like the movie. And you know what? It's not a perfect movie. If a film critic was to look at it, they would probably hate it. But it's a fun comedy and it's a fun movie about wrestling. And this is pretty much all we had for a while as wrestling fans in movies going. Now, what I especially like about this movie is the way it portrays wrestling. It portrays wrestling as, you know, a work in a business and all of that. But when Jimmy King gets betrayed, it's like someone starts shooting in the middle of a match and actually beats the crap out of Jimmy King. And then
that kind of shooting.
Yeah,
Yes,
not that. Yeah,
I thought you meant like
shoot
click.
versus work here. Okay, so he starts like punching him for real and actually beats the crap out of him to take the title from Jimmy King. So it becomes like Jimmy King actually has to legitimately fight these guys at the end of the movie because they're not going to work with him in a regular wrestling match.
That's why it's the wrestling fan's dream. And Keith, we are watching this. Like, I am forcing you to watch this. We'll figure out a way, even if it means you coming down to Puerto Rico or something. But it is the wrestling fan's dream in the sense that it is a movie that takes itself, even though it's a comedy, wrestling is real within the context of this movie, even though a couple of times...
Not really.
Because you're
It's
working
not
with,
like they
you're
treat
talking about
everything in
works and
wrestling
shoots.
like it's real. Because at the beginning of the movie, they show that it's a work.
Yes, but I mean, like, let's be real. Jimmy King was trespassing, yet he magically gets a title shot. There are little things about it that even though they pull the curtain, they go, no. It's just this little thing. Like, wrestling is real. It's just this is a little bit staged or something. But I love this movie. It's such a good time. It is a comedy popcorn flick, and I know that we have a lot of younger listeners and watchers. If you've not seen this, it's unfortunately not out on Blu-ray, which is a travesty. That is a damn crime. But
Really?
You can get it. It was one of the first DVDs that came out. The DVD box is cardboard. It's not even plastic.
wow.
It is that old.
You know what?
That's amazing.
I actually have it right here.
Yes!
And it's actually still in the shrink wrap.
What?
Because I had seen it so many times, and then it was gifted to me, and I haven't watched it since. But yeah, this is like a very cheap case. Like, it's actually pretty indented right now, but yeah, there you go.
The
I'm
last
trying
thing,
not to have a glare on here. Oh, too bad.
yeah, people can see it. The last thing I want to sort of bring
I was
up.
like, I know I have that somewhere around here.
Well, now
Sorry,
you need to
I'm walking
rewatch
off
it.
cam for a second, but
You got to unshrink that thing now. But before we move on, the quick thing and the reason why this movie is so important is a lot of this movie trickled into the actual WCW product to the point where David Arquette became WCW champion. The Triple Cage match that happened in WCW happened because of the movie. It was a match on the movie, so they eventually brought that up. And a lot of people pinpoint that as to the demise of WCW. David Arquette himself did not want to become champion. So it is to that extent that it became a travesty in the world of wrestling. Now we go from comedy to comedier? Not necessarily funnier, but Nacho Libre. We're talking about 6 years after Ready to Rumble, Jack Black decides to wear some stretchy pants, is for fun, and become a wrestler. Now, this takes it one step further where this is completely real. Like, wrestling is this mystical thing where he is trying to train, yet magically at the end he's better, even though he's sucked throughout the entire movie and can't wrestle worth damn. Ryan, you have seen it. Keith, you have not seen it?
I have not seen it. It's same thing with Ready to Rumble. You'll hear so much about it, you learn so much about it. I just never took the time to sit down and watch it. It's not like I don't dislike the idea of it. I actually really like the idea of Nacho Libre and wish that they did more with it. But I say that, but I never sat down and actually checked it out.
Yeah, Nacho Libre I did not like very much, to be honest. The portrayal of wrestling as just completely real, for whatever reason at the time, I just didn't like the way that they did it.
Because you were a teenage smark, that's why.
Yeah, for the movie, I mean, obviously it makes sense. It felt like, oh, this is kind of the standard movie, and then we threw wrestling in there. And it wasn't particularly that funny either. So it just kind of missed me on all points.
It had some Napoleon Dynamite vibes to it, right?
Yes, very much, very much.
And I don't think that was good for it, because it was a comedy flick that took itself overly serious. So hypothetically, that's a recipe for success, right? Like, you kind of poke fun at just how serious it is, but it never thrives. Like, the character sucks throughout the whole movie. And Jack Black is Jack Black in the movie. Like, he doesn't play anything different. And just that combination, I don't think works very well. Like, I got to see it again on Netflix. I believe it was only like 5 or 6 months ago. And even though I can sit down and watch it, at no point do I go, that was awesome. I mean, Human Tornado was in it, who's an awesome indie wrestler. And that, he got some exposure because of it. But I never understood what was the point of this movie. With Ready to Rumble, you get it. You bring in WCW guys with Beyond the Mat, documentary, No Holds Barred, Hulk Hogan, WWF. With Nacho Libre, you take wrestling seriously, but for what? Like, what is the goal? I just never understood that, even though this did do better than No Holds Barred. It is better. I mean, everything is better than No Holds Barred, to be quite frank.
Yeah, there's not many things that are apparently worse from the words you guys are saying.
Yes. So now, this is it. This movie is basically the reason this topic is really worth discussing. And it is The Wrestler, released in 2008. This film starred Mickey Rourke. And it is an interesting film from a production standpoint, because they ran out of money towards the end of this movie, to the point where Guns N' Roses donated their music for the film, so that when Mickey Rourke's character came out at the end, he had some unique music to come out to. And this was sort of Mickey Rourke's return. He had been dealing with a lot of addiction, drug issues, and people saw this as not just a return for wrestling in the mainstream, but Mickey Rourke, and they delivered. This is not just a great wrestling movie, it's one of my favorites of all time. So beginning with Keith, I know the three of us did see this one, and for good reason. So what did you think about The Wrestler and the impact that it had for you as a fan of wrestling?
I'm completely with you. Not only do I think this is a great wrestling movie, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's about as real as it gets. It's basically, hey, I wrestled in the 80s. This is my life story, the movie. It's much like Beyond the Mat, but in a very different way. It's got a very dark tone to it. Like, Mickey Rourke's character is this washed up wrestler that's still trying to really just make money off of his old glory because he's not good at anything else, and basically slowly destroys his life in the process. And it's an incredible story and an incredible tale. And it's hard not to recommend it.
Yeah, this movie is fantastic. It's a great character story, and the way it's a very realistic portrayal of what wrestling is like, especially for someone who, after they've peaked in their career, a lot of wrestlers still work the indies after they leave the big companies, and they're just trying to make money just to get by. And it's a very real story that we've seen a lot of times in real life, and Mickey Rourke just absolutely nails this role.
Knocked it out of the park.
It's just the way it's filmed. It's very gritty, and it's just shot very differently than most movies, and you just feel a lot like closer to the character than you would for most. And it's absolutely fantastic, and it's depressing as hell, but it is great.
Yeah, it doesn't have a happy ending, and I think that's one of the things that makes it so great. Like, that movie does not end in a very good place, and I personally love that.
Yeah, this movie touched on so many things. Roddy Piper, may he rest in peace, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, they openly said they cried because they can identify themselves. Stories like Jake Roberts, like so many people in the wrestling industry, they're massively over 50,000 people inside of an arena, 50,000, and then it's high school gyms, and you get paid $20-$50, and all the drugs that are involved. And they filmed on location. Ring of Honor, they redid some of the things just so they could film there. They had Necro Butcher versus Mickey Rourke. They had so many different talent involved in this, and we went as far as to kind of having a storyline between Chris Jericho and Mickey Rourke. This will always be the thing that never happened and kind of did, because Mickey Rourke, apparently what happened was that they were supposed to feud, but Mickey Rourke in an interview sort of leaked that out a little earlier, and apparently his PR person said, you don't want to do that when you're nominated for an Academy Award. And it was nominated for 2. And most people, even people that cannot stand wrestling, said that film should have won a freaking Academy Award. And I completely agree. So what we got to see was, instead of a match, we got to see the punch and then Jericho battling the legends, Ricky Steamboat, which that was pretty awesome. So we got something awesome out of it. And what an emotional ride. If anybody that's watching that has not seen this movie, please watch it. It is amazing. And if you have seen it, let us know what you think about it. Now, as an honorable mention, we wanted to bring up something fun because Macho Man Randy Savage was involved in the first original versions of the Spider-Man movies, because we've gotten like hundreds of them now. But Spider-Man 1, it was released in 2002, and one of the scenes that people talk about the most involved Bonesaw is ready.
Bonesaw is ready.
And it was awesome.
I've done enough Macho Man stuff in my day, so I'll leave you guys to that.
Mr. McNulty, as the resident savage of Byte That, what you think of this awesome movie scene where Spider-Man made his debut in pro wrestling? That was the debut of Spider-Man. It was
pretty cool. I do love that scene just because it's like, oh, what would happen if a superhero got to fight in wrestling? Once again, they're obviously portraying wrestling as a legitimate, real sport in this universe. And I thought it was just really, really cool to see just like how awesome Spider-Man would measure up against somebody in just a straight up fight. And clearly he would do pretty well.
Because he's Spider-Man, but what I loved about it was that it was a comic book take on professional wrestling, like just so over the top, in a cage, just surrounded by people that just want to see somebody get ripped apart. Macho Man in that was like jacked to the nines. He was bigger than any human being should be, and it was just an awesome look. And as a little side note, it is also mentioned in one of the greatest rap songs of all time, Be a Man Hulk, by Randy Savage. Listen to it.
Randy Savage, man, the man, may he rest in peace as well. It's an emotional video that we're doing right now because when you think about the context of wrestling with Beyond the Mat, the wrestler, it's always in some form about...
Not all fun.
Yeah, but it's about the struggle or, hey, these people died and it is because of the world of wrestling that we love to watch, but then not necessarily everything about it is all peaches and cream. So as we close this off, we've talked about the wrestler, but if there's one thing to take away, one thing that you have to recommend, not necessarily because the movie is great, but maybe it's so bad that you have to have somebody watch No Holds Barred, what do you think people should do as an action immediately after watching this video?
Like you said, go watch The Wrestler. And the other one that I would recommend is Beyond the Mat. Even though it's not the brightest look into the world, it's still good to have that context under your belt. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. I would recommend the DVD version, or it's not out on Blu-ray, is it?
I don't believe so.
Because there's a lot of neat extras on there as well. Like you get to see, while this one isn't so dark, you get to see Vince Russo produce the first segment that Dude Love was involved in. That was a very neat little look into how things got done in the Attitude Era. Can't recommend those two enough.
Yeah, Beyond the Mat also had like a teeny clip of Jim Johnston, who we never get to see ever.
Oh,
So
yeah.
he was, I believe he was talking about the Ultimate Warrior's theme or something, or Vader's theme. But anyway, I would say recommend watching The Wrestler, as Keith mentioned, and see Ready to Rumble. Those are the two movies you have to see. And yeah, backstage stuff, Beyond the Mat's a good choice. There's even like a TV special they did years ago. It was like the mystery behind wrestling or whatever, but that kind of goes a different direction. So Beyond the Mat's probably your best bet for that.
Yeah, for me, I have to recommend strongly Ready to Rumble. The Wrestler is the easy pick, but Ready to Rumble is a testament to a time where wrestling was cool. It was so cool that they simply made a movie about the crazy world around it. And even though afterwards WCW kind of died and David Arquette became champion, and yeah, things that should not be talked about. The movie itself was a fan's dream come true. I've watched it. I watch it at least once a month, real talk. And most of the times while I'm doing some DDP yoga, which ain't your mama's yoga, I watch me a little bit of Ready to Rumble and mark out when I see DDP on screen. So ladies and gentlemen, you that is currently listening or watching to us, which was your favorite movie of the bunch? At the same time, there are other classic movies, or really old movies, or other ones like the Bret Hart one that we didn't get to. If there are any ones that you think that we should check out or talk about, let us know. Drop a comment about that, as well as check out the podcast available every single Tuesday night, where we break down our thoughts about WWE Raw, pay-per-views, and so much more. And if you want to support us, help us grow so much, you can support us by becoming a supporter. A lot of support on Patreon. So that is patreon.com/Byte That. You get cool perks such as early access. You get behind the scenes as to what we are going to be talking about regarding things such as the Square Roundtables. So thank you so much for the support watching this video, and we will be back with tons more right here on Byte That.